Now, we talked about how people create idealized commodities, such as the coffee C futures market. Now, this graph shows the price in cents per pound for a contract of coffee, where each contract is 37,500 pounds. A lot of coffee. You can see the price of the coffee at Farmgate has bounced around a great deal over the years. From November 2020 to November 2021, the price doubled. From 2015 to 2020, prices had been around $1 a pound. In 2021, prices rose past $2, bounced down to $1.50, and since then have doubled again, more than $3 per pound. Now, the price has been almost as high in the past, and note this is nominal dollars, but of course the purchasing power of a dollar has declined over the decades. A dollar in 1980 was able to purchase more than 3 times more stuff. So when coffee was nearly $3 a pound back then, that was a really good price for the farmers and expensive for consumers. But still, the recent boost in price has been good for farmers and tougher for consumers. Now, to be clear, this is about weather more than climate. Bad weather in Brazil and Vietnam, 2 of the world's biggest producers, meant the supply curve shifted inward and the market price had to rise. Note a big chunk of the reduction in harvest was for Robusta beans. Those are a cheaper substitute for Arabica. So as the supply of Robusta falls and the price of Robusta rises, that means that some people switch to Arabica, which raises demand for those beans, so the price of Arabica also rises. Some people used to save money by maybe drinking inferior coffee, but as the price of that inferior coffee rises, they switch over. Note in our previous discussions of supply and demand, the supply curve was in the short run. In the longer run, growers will see higher coffee prices and plant more. Obviously, it takes time for plants to grow, but that means the supply curve will be shifting outwards, which will lower prices. So it's not likely that the current high prices will continue. Here's the Robusta price. It's traded in London, but still denominated in dollars. This one lists per metric ton. Metric ton is about 2,200 pounds, so more than $5,000 per metric ton works out to about $2.40 a pound. So about $1 per pound less than Arabica. But you can't go to the exchange with $5,000 and buy just 1 ton. The minimum contract is 10 tons. The price series doesn't go far back, but you can see the recent prices have been unprecedented, more than double the typical price before 2023. Now for the coffee C futures price of Arabica beans, I'd shown the price of the spot contract, immediate delivery, but people can also buy for delivery in the future. This chart shows the different delivery dates. Every few months, every other month in the summer, fewer in the winter, the price of each of those contracts. Note, the price drops as delivery goes farther out in the future. That's pretty normal behavior. If somebody's making a commitment to buy or sell long time in the future, they can get a better deal. But especially when the price, which has historically been quite volatile, when that's at a nearly all-time high, the lower prices make sense that people are also betting the price won't stay high. For many commodities, there's a date for delivery, but often no actual physical good. The parties just settle cash value. If somebody agrees to buy at $5,000 per ton and the market price at delivery date ends up being $5,200, then the person makes $200 per ton on that purchase. Or vice versa, if the price went down, then the money would go in the other direction. But so often there's just an exchange of money. Some fraction of market participants will actually deliver goods, but in most cases just settle the value. Maybe they're a big roaster, they've got their own shipments set up, but they just wanted to protect the price they pay. Or maybe some folks are just gambling. Speculating. Every financial market has some participants who are speculating on price changes. They might think they have an edge. They might actually have an edge. They might use the market to make money or lose money. Now, let's divert back and ask a counterfactual question. The markets I showed are for somebody willing to buy 22,000 pounds of Robusta or 37,500 pounds of Arabica. So, do you suppose an exchange might offer smaller lots? They don't, but other financial markets have. Sometimes they call it a mini. Might offer it 1/100th the size. Why would they do that? Well, that attracts smaller investors. I mean, gamblers. People with a smaller bankroll. Volatility is good for the people in the middle, the market makers. Why is that? Well, think about why any exchange is valuable. Suppose they're a commodity where the price never changed. It was $100 today and yesterday and last year and 10 years ago. Never been anything different. Would anybody go to a market to lock in a price? No. Obviously, there's no need for that. On the other hand, people are willing to pay for protection from price swings if those price swings are large. They're big. If there's no swings, if there's no volatility, then there's not really a market. When prices change a lot, people in the middle can make a larger spread. It's good for the exchange, good for the people in the middle. So why don't the exchanges do that already? Why aren't there already mini contracts? Well, because the clients on either side don't want volatility necessarily. Sure, having some dumb money in the market might help the sophisticated traders, but it adds complications. And the exchange isn't really offering much. I mean, people go to buy there because that's where all the sellers are. People go to sell there because that's where all the buyers are. These sort of two-sided markets are difficult to set up, vulnerable to sudden changes in fashion. What if there's suddenly a competitor? A lot of buyers and sellers go elsewhere. Market exchange loses. That's a problem if somebody wanted to set up their own exchange, too. There are places where people can create contracts. Often those look more like gambling. Maybe the contract is for which team wins the World Cup or something, but encompass other events, like whether a movie will win awards or a company will announce a new product. So somebody could offer a contract that looks like a futures contract. But if there's no buyers and no sellers, then it's not going to prosper. It's the same reason why gamblers on sports games usually face a point spread. Gambling on a simple proposition, which team wins, might have an obvious favorite, so most people would not be willing to buy or sell. So instead, the bookmakers offer a point spread, which is not just will a certain team win, but will that team win by at least a certain number of points. The bookmakers want to get at the point where they're about equal dollars on each side of the bet, which is a useful way of thinking about lots of financial prices. Those prices we see are balancing out the trades. Many highly sophisticated traders are basically indifferent to which side of the trade they're on. It's useful to remember that. If you think you got some hot tip, or you've watched a few videos and convinced the price can only go one direction, remember there are a lot of people on the other side of the trade, and you're not necessarily smarter than all of them. Finally, note all these prices are in US dollars. People in other countries, so most producers of coffee and a lot of consumers, would additionally face some foreign exchange risk. They make a contract to set the value of coffee in dollars, but then the value of dollars relative to whatever the Brazilian or real, that's going to also fluctuate. So they might participate in other financial markets to lock in the price of their own currency relative to dollars. If some exchange ever wanted to really bring in the total degen gamblers, then they could offer maybe mini contracts denominated in Bitcoin or something, but whatever. A few things to note about these prices. First, this is the price for delivery to a place like New York. Obviously, that's not the price consumers pay. Checked, 12 ounces of Starbucks Pike Place beans, which are 100% Arabica, so maybe not too far off from the contract, $9.79, so about $13 a pound. Now, there are variations. You could find it more cheaply if you search around. Coffee C was 328 cents per pound, so $3.28. Now, those are green, and roasting boils off some of the water in the beans, so they might lose maybe 20% of their weight. So 20% more, but the cost of beans close to $4 a pound, maybe. But still, most of the cost of those beans is not the beans. And that's just for a consumer buying beans. Buying a cup of coffee, grande at the Bucks, that's around $2.50. It's 16 ounces, which is 473 milliliters. Call it a half liter, just because it's easier to do the math there. Now, again, obviously there are other liquids in the cup besides coffee, milk, whatever pumps of the extra sugar that people like. But still, if I brewed a half-liter of coffee, I'd personally use about 30 grams of ground beans, so could make about 15 of those size cups of coffee from a pound of beans. With beans costing $3 or $4 a pound, that's like 20 or 25 cents of the cost going for the beans. The rest goes to other parts of the cost. Roasting takes time and heat, so that's the energy cost. The beans need to be delivered to the appropriate places. The shop needs to pay rent. They need to pay the barista. They have to pay for the cost of milk, the sweeteners, the cups, the stirrers, the napkins, those cup holders so people don't burn their fingers. Of course, the brand name is worth a lot. They establish a brand with advertising and marketing, all of which get to the point. Coffee beans have skyrocketed, but how much did ordinary consumers really notice? A doubling of coffee bean prices meant the cost of the main ingredient of your morning cup went up by maybe 10 cents. It helps us understand what might be the impact of climate change on our morning routines. Adding 10 cents is it's not nothing, but if I drink a coffee per day, that's $36.50 per year from paying a dime more for the cup a day. It's not going to change my life. But it means coffee growers get a lot more. That fundamental asymmetry is why both climate change will not have a giant impact on most consumers in wealthy countries, but also drives the ideals of ethical coffee initiatives. That it's, really not that much money for a lot of consumers, but it's life-changing for some of the growers. Final note, prices will likely come back down. That graph I started with showed that Arabica prices in past years, they go up, they come down. How does that impact profits for well-known brands that sell a lot of coffee? If the current price to consumer for a pound of beans is $13, and I compare that to the current price of beans, $40 or whatever the price at some point in the past, the beans on the shelf were, they were shipped across the ocean some time ago. This is a common feature for many products. The raw materials were purchased at some price, then the price of those raw materials changed by the time the final good was sold. How does the company book profits? Well, the accountants refer to the choices here as FIFO and LIFO. FIFO is first in, first out. LIFO is last in, first out. Either the cost of the product, for here the beans, can be the historical price that was paid, or the cost of the beans can be the cost of replacing the ones that were just sold. If I'm running a coffee shop, maybe I bought beans a while ago at $1.50 a pound. By the time I sold them, maybe new beans cost $3. I made money. Kinda. But, assuming I want the business to continue, I have to buy more beans at the current cost of $3. So maybe I didn't make money. If the price falls down later, then I would lose money, but in the same kind of way. Firms have some choice about how to account for these fluctuations. It's not unlimited. Of course, firms want more money, so they want more profits. But on the other hand, they pay taxes on their profits, so they want to show less profits. Accounting is complicated. You can take a class on that.